The biting wind was the only sound in the alley, a hungry moan echoing between brick canyons. It was a place where light died, and hope was a forgotten word. A sliver of a boy, no older than 9, sat hunched against the damp concrete, his entire world distilled to a single, hard crust of bread. The air tensed as a shadow shifted from the refuse pile, a massive, scarred beast with eyes that held the history of every betrayal. The dog was starvation personified, a silhouette of primal danger. The boy, Elias, saw not a monster, but a mirror of his own profound hunger. When Elias raised his hand, not to defend himself, but to offer the only piece of sustenance he owned, no one in that silent, desolate street could have anticipated that this small act of sacrificial love was the very mechanism of his future, the key to unlocking a destiny far greater than the dust he sat upon. The dog was called Fenris by the few who ever noticed him, a name spat out more in fear than in recognition. He was a colossal mix, with the deep-chested build of a mastiff and the coarse, iron-gray coat of a northern breed. Every inch of him was a map of past violence, a ragged tear in his ear, a white, puckered seam running along his flank. But it was his eyes that truly terrified, a pale, amber hue, perpetually narrowed, reflecting no spark of warmth. They were the eyes of a creature who had decided the world was an enemy and survival were the only prayer. He had learned the language of the street, a symphony of slamming dumpsters and human disregard. He possessed a desperate, cold intelligence, knowing exactly which shadows to melt into and which sounds meant immediate threat. The shelter workers, on the rare occasions they cornered him, labeled him simply, untamable. Too damaged to integrate. They saw a feral threat, they missed the slow, agonizing flinches every time a hand moved too fast. Fenris was not aggressive, he was merely perpetually braced for the next wound. His breathing was always shallow, his head low, constantly scanning the environment for the next inevitable fight. Beneath the scarred hide lay a heart frozen by betrayal, convinced that kindness was a myth and that the only honest companion was the hollow ache in his stomach. The setting sun, when it sometimes caught the dust motes around him, made his silhouette seem enormous, a statue of pure, hopeless isolation. Elias was a spirit carved from shadow and light. Orphaned since a fever took his mother, his reason for existing now was a relentless, daily negotiation with the streets. His name, Elias, meaning, "The Lord is my God," felt like a cruel joke in the cold world that had offered him nothing but hunger. He was dressed in clothes too thin for the season, his small hands perpetually chapped, and his knees visible through worn patches. His hair was the color of dust, and his face was dominated by eyes that were far too large and too old for a child, a deep, bruised blue that had seen too much farewell. He carried an invisible wound, a profound loneliness that hollowed out his small chest, far heavier than the gnawing hunger. He hadn't just lost a mother, he had lost his only anchor to the human world. He was a vessel of silent suffering, wandering the periphery of the city's life, desperate only for a quiet corner and a moment's peace. When he saw Fenris, he didn't see the scars or the brute strength. He saw the same haunted, empty look he saw every morning in the puddles. He recognized the profound, aching truth that they were both discarded things, both waiting for the final indifference of the world to consume them. His greatest fear wasn't physical harm, it was that no one, not a single soul, would ever truly see him before he faded away completely. The space between Elias and Fenris felt charged, a compressed volume of air ready to explode. The dog shifted his weight, a deep, grinding growl rumbling up from his massive chest, a sound like stone dragging on stone. It wasn't a warning, it was a promise of defense. Elias paused, not out of fear, but out of profound respect for the animal's pain. He didn't drop the bread. He didn't run. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate step forward, his worn shoes barely whispering on the cracked pavement. This movement, so small yet so brave, was a violation of the dog's fiercely guarded boundary. Fenris responded with a sickening flash of teeth, his head dropping lower, his body coiling. The ambient noise of the city, a distant siren, a hurried voice, seemed to vanish, leaving a vacuum of pure, suspended terror. Time stretched. Elias felt the hammering of his own heart, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. But he held the dog's gaze, not challenging it, but simply holding it, his own face a mask of serene, heartbreaking vulnerability. The adults who occasionally passed through this neglected street would have shrieked, would have thrown stones, or called for the authorities, but in this moment, there were only the two of them, the broken boy and the wounded beast, locked in a timeless, desperate negotiation. Elias lowered himself carefully, sinking onto his knees in the grime. The scent of fear should have been overpowering, yet Elias exuded only a strange, quiet calm, like a small candle in a terrible storm. He extended his arm slowly, not throwing the bread, but offering it from his open palm. His voice, thin but clear, finally broke the spell of silence. "I know you're hungry," he whispered, his words not a plea, but a statement of simple, shared fact. I only have this one piece. We can share it. The dog's trembling was visible now, not just a low vibration but a full, nervous shudder that ran from his powerful shoulders to his docked tail. He was torn between his overwhelming hunger and the ingrained, deep-seated command to never trust a gentle hand. The tension was breathless, hanging in the cold air, waiting for the definitive, life-changing choice. Fenris remained utterly still for what felt like an eternity, a monument to suspicion. The crust of bread, humble and dry, trembled slightly in Elias's tiny, dirt-streaked hand. The dog's pale eyes darted from the bread to Elias's face, searching for the trick, the inevitable cruelty that always followed a moment of false promise. Elias spoke again, his voice cracking slightly, revealing the vulnerability beneath his calm facade. I haven't eaten all day, either, he admitted. But I think you need it more. I know what it feels like to be so cold that it hurts inside. He didn't anthropomorphize the dog, he simply offered a genuine reflection of his own soul. You're not bad, Fenris, Elias said, quietly speaking the name no one else would dare use. You're not bad. You're just hurt. I was scared, too, when she left me. That final, profound confession, the acknowledgement of his own invisible pain, was the key. It was the absolute, unguarded truth of one lonely soul laid bare before another. Fenris's body posture changed. The tense, coiled energy began to bleed out of him. The low growl did not disappear instantly, but it softened, becoming less a threat and more a weary, questioning sound. Slowly, with an almost unbelievable reverence, Fenris took the final, monumental risk. He extended his snout, the movement painfully slow, and his powerful jaws carefully, delicately, closed not just around the bread, but around the very edge of Elias's fingers. It was the first touch. Not the sharp bite of a cornered beast, but the warm, damp pressure of a life-taking. Elias did not flinch. He let the dog take the bread, and then, with the crumbs still lingering on his palm, he waited. The moment the food was gone, Fenris's eyes, the pale amber orbs that had held so much hostile pain, suddenly softened. The tension around the dog's muzzle released, and a long, shuddering sigh of primal relief escaped him. He lowered his massive head, not in submission, but in a gesture of profound, surrendered trust, and nudged the scarred side of his face against Elias's hand, a silent, weighty thank you that transcended language. The transaction was complete, sealed not by a bargain, but by an offering of selfless love. Years unspooled like thin, frayed thread. The shared crust of bread marked the beginning of a relentless, silent companionship. Fenris never left Elias, not even when the boy found a dilapidated orphanage. The dog became Elias's shadow, his protector, his quiet witness to every small victory and cold night. Fenris's presence, a colossal, silent guarantee of safety, allowed Elias to focus, to study, to dream beyond the damp alley. The boy, with the dog's unwavering loyalty as his foundation, climbed out of the darkness. He became a man, sharp and driven, eventually founding a construction and development firm built on the principle of fair housing, a quiet homage to the streets he once called home. He carried the scars of his childhood not in anger, but in a profound dedication to giving others the stable ground he never had. 23 years after the alley, Elias, now Mr. Thorne, stood on the steel skeletal frame of his largest project, a complex housing development for displaced families. He was personally inspecting the final upper levels. The wind was high, a cruel reminder of the past, whistling through the girders with a sound that felt both familiar and ominous. Below him, on the vast construction site, a critical structural beam, one improperly secured by a rushed subcontractor, buckled. It sent a piercing, metallic shriek through the site, a noise of violent tearing, followed by a terrifying, accelerating torrent of falling debris. It was a failure of the scaffolding, a catastrophe unfolding in slow, terrifying motion directly below the edge where Elias stood. In that instant of paralyzing fear, a flash of iron gray, immense and impossibly fast, launched itself through the chaos. Fenris, now old, his coat dusted with white, his gait a little stiff, but his loyalty absolute, had followed his master up the stairs years ago and now refused to leave the site. He let out a single, powerful bark, not of warning, but of command, that cut through the demolition sound. He slammed his body into Elias's legs, a desperate, powerful shove that sent the man sprawling backward onto the main platform, away from the collapsing section. The entire metallic structure groaned and crashed only a foot from where Elias had been standing, the noise a deafening, final roar. Elias lay stunned, covered in dust, his heart hammering in his throat. He looked up. Fenris stood over him, panting, a new, jagged piece of metal embedded shallowly in his aging flank. The silence returned, this time filled with the shocked awe of the workman. The massive dog had simply appeared, acted, and saved the life of the man who had shared his only bread 23 years ago. Divine justice, delivered not by a miracle, but by the unbroken chain of a debt of love. Elias knelt in the dust, cradling the dog's heavy head, his adult tears washing the grime from Fenris's old face. The wound was tended to, but the greater truth was the debt that had been repaid, a circle of compassion perfectly closed. The bread, a mere crust shared in a dark alley, had bought his life back 20 years later. It was a potent, aching testament to the invisible threads that weave through the fabric of existence. The universe, Elias realized, keeps a flawless tally. Every sincere act of giving, every moment of choosing to love over fear, is an investment in an unwritten future. It is a quiet, profound faith, that the seed of goodness you sow when you have nothing will inevitably blossom when you need it most. That destiny is not a random draw, but the ultimate reward for a heart that refuses to harden. Fenris did not just save Elias's life, he proved that the kindness given to a lost creature is never lost, but merely held in trust until the perfect, destined moment of return. It was the day Elias remembered that the greatest wealth is not what you acquire, but what you freely give away. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today.